Hey, I'm Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and I am excited because only twice a year do I film a video sharing my top 10 favorite games of all time as of right now. This is my September 2023 video. The last time I did this was in February, maybe March, whatever 6 months ago is. So a couple of guidelines about this list. I run a company called Stonemaier Games. I've designed some of our games. I've also developed all the other games with the designers that created those games. None of those games are eligible for this list, but I did ask Stonemaier ambassadors, volunteers for Stonemaier Games, to pick their favorite Stonemaier game and their favorite non-Stonemaier game. I'll get to that in a minute. And the top 5 picks for Stonemaier ambassadors for our games, again, not eligible for my personal list, even though some of these would definitely be on the list, leaves us with, at number 5, Expeditions, our newest game. 7 people picked Expeditions. Viticulture, 18 ambassadors picked Viticulture. Then Tapestry, with just barely more than that, 20 people picked Tapestry. Wingspan is next with 29 people selecting it. And Scythe is still number 1 for ambassadors with 40 people selecting that. We'll see if that changes over the next 6 months. If more people end up choosing Expeditions than Scythe, we'll see what happens there. But yeah, Scythe is the winner for ambassadors as of right now. Ambassador picks for non-Stonemaier games include Seven Wonders, A Feast for Odin, and these are picks that were made multiple times by multiple ambassadors. Seven Wonders, A Feast for Odin, Aeon's End, Agricola, Ark Nova, Arkham Horror LCG, Battlestar Galactica. It's interesting to see some of these games on the list too, because they are so different than some of the games that we publish here at Stonemaier Games. Brass, Castles of Burgundy, Clank, Dune Imperium, Frosthaven, John Company 2nd Edition, Lost Ruins of Arnak, Pandemic Legacy Season 1, Quacks of Quedlinburg, Root, Sleeping Gods, Space Base, Spirit Island, Terra Mystica, Terraforming Mars, Twilight, Imperium 4th Edition. I will go into much more detail about the games on my list. I'm just kind of going through a few lists right now to give you some ideas of who these people are who are picking our favorite games, the ambassadors who are picking their favorite games at Stonemaier Games. Now let me get on to a few lists for myself. I have some honorable mentions, and I also wanted to start out by mentioning some of my favorite campaign games right now. Like when I'm looking back and remembering the great times I had with campaign games, what are some of my favorites? The ones that came to mind, these are ones that showed up on previous top 10 lists, and ones that I just remember fondly, are My City, Near and Far, The Rise of Queensdale, Role Player Adventures, for which I'm very much looking forward to the expansion, which is coming out soon. Sleeping Gods, which I'm also very much looking forward to the sequel to Sleeping Gods, Distant Skies. The King's Dilemma, again, I'm looking forward to the sequel, The Queen's Dilemma. Time Stories, and Clank Legacy, which also has a sequel, Clank Legacy 2. I'm also looking forward to that one. I very much enjoy campaign experiences, but those games don't make many of my top 10 lists because they are so specifically campaign games. They're not games that I return to after I've completed the campaign. So now I have 2 honorable mention lists. I have one. So the way that I pick my top 10 favorite games is that I look back at all the different top 10 lists that I filmed over the last, 7, 8 years on this YouTube channel. Across many different topics. Many of them are mechanism focused, others are genre focused, or also like sub-mechanism focused, category focused. And I looked at, or the games that I made eligible for my list are games that have appeared in the top 2 or 3 positions of those lists at least 1 or 2 times. Ideally more than once, ideally a few times. And that way I'm not just picking games on my list that just happen to be games on my mind recently. These are games that have had a lasting impact on me, even if they only came out 6 months ago, that they potentially made a couple different lists during that time. And I have some games on my list that will meet that category. So I have 2 different categories of honorable mentions. One are my top honorable mentions, the ones that were really close to making the top 10 list, and others were games that I really enjoy. I'm always happy to play these games, but they weren't quite in contention for my top 10 list this year. Those games are Marvel Dice Throne, No Thanks, On Tour, Aura et Labora, Parks, Patchwork, Poker, QE, Railways of the World, Rogers of the Ganges, Scotland Yard, Shards of Infinity, Summit, Sushi Roll, Telestrations, The Crew, The Mind, Seven Wonders, A Feast for Odin, Azul Summer Pavilion, Cartographers, Castles of Magic and Ludwig, Clans of Caledonia, Concordia, Ethnos, Glenmore 2, Hanamikoji, and the original Libertalia, not the new Stonemaier version, which I like even more, but wasn't eligible for this list. Now, my top honorable mentions, these games came really close to making this list. They have made previous top 10 lists. They will probably make future top 10 lists. They are Seven Wonders Duel, Mysterium Park, Orleans, Planet Unknown, Role Player, Rumble Nation, Russian Railroads, Space Base, The Guild of Merchant Explorers, Clank, Dice Forge, Downforce, Fantasy Realms, The Isle of Cats, Just One, and Lords of Waterdeep. Now that I've named a ton of different games, let's move on to my top 10 list and spend a little bit more time with each of these games as I talk about them. And number 10 on my list right now is Magic the Gathering. I could hold up some visuals here, but you could probably picture Magic the Gathering. The way I play Magic the Gathering, this is a dueling trading card game that I have played off and on since I was around 13 years old. I'm 42 now as I'm filming this. I think I'm 42. Am I 41? I think I'm 42. 42, yeah. When you get old enough, you stop thinking about the exact age. But I've played Magic a long time. And the way that I found as an adult now, as a 42-year-old adult, the way that I enjoy playing it is that oftentimes when a new set comes out, I buy enough so that I can draft the set with my friends. I invite them over for around 2 to 3 hours. Usually it takes us to play a full draft. And what we do is we draft it. That means you open a pack of cards, which feels awesome in Magic the Gathering. You open a pack of cards, you pick one of those cards out, and you pass the rest of your hand to the next player. You do this through 3 full packs. So you end up with a bunch of cards, and then you cull those cards down to a 40-card deck. A lot of that's lands, too, in a deck of Magic the Gathering. And then we play. Then we play one game each against each opponent. So you get to see every other opponent's deck, every person's deck, and experience what it's like to duel against those other players. That's why it usually takes around 3 hours. I love this format. I love exploring these decks and seeing how the mechanisms meld together. I recently had a blast playing the Lord of the Rings set. Actually drafted that twice. I enjoyed it so much. There's so many mechanisms in Magic the Gathering that it's hard to distill it down to just a few of them. But really, it's the creativity of the different sets and how the theme is integrated into the different abilities on the cards that I really admire. If I had one keyword that comes to mind that I really enjoy, I really love the suspend mechanism. I'm hoping they bring that back someday. That's when, instead of playing a card for its cost, you can instead suspend it. So you pay a very small cost and put a bunch of counters on it. And whenever you remove all those counters, you typically remove them once per turn, that card comes into play. And it feels really good because at that time, it feels like a free card when it finally comes into play. Many other mechanisms that I really enjoy, but that is one that comes to mind. Magic the Gathering at number 10. At number 9 is a game that I will hold up. This is the new Ra. And really, I enjoy any versions of Ra, including, I think, the Priest of Ra is one offshoot, spin-off sequel. But the core game of Ra is one that I really, really enjoy for multiple reasons. This is an auction game that you play over the course of 3 rounds. You don't know exactly how long each of those rounds will last because it's determined by a certain bad tile. It's not a bad tile, but it's a tile that accelerates each round of the game. Whenever you pull that out of a bag, and enough of those tiles pile up, then the round is over. So you don't know exactly when that's going to happen, leading to some push your luck elements. Push your luck is an element that I love in games because you don't know exactly when the round will end. You don't know whether or not you need to hang around in the round to win a big auction, an auction where a bunch of different tiles have piled up, or if you need to go after a smaller auction earlier on in the round, and get fewer tiles, potentially. And so in this game, yeah, it is not a tile placement game, but it's a tile gathering game. Here's the back of the box here. And you're gathering these tiles, you're auctioning them off, and the auction is super, super simple and streamlined. I love this about the game, that you just have, depending on the player count, you have either 3 or 4 auction tiles. And whenever you use one of those auction tiles, whenever you win an auction and use a tile, that tile is used up for the round. In fact, you actually lose that tile, you'll gain another one from the auction, and that tile that you gain is used up, and you can't use it again. So there's no currency that you're having to keep track of or spend. You just have these 3 or 4 tiles that you're using for each round of the auction. It's just a wonderful auction game. It's a wonderful game with that push your luck element, and it also is a great set collection game that does set collection really, really well. So yeah, Ra. My number 9 favorite game right now. And number 8 is one of the newest games on the list. This is Star Wars, the deck building game. This is a 2-player dueling game where one player plays the Empires, one player plays the Rebels. And a lot of the joyful moments for me come from that dichotomy between those 2 different factions in the game, because there's this central card row in Star Wars, the deck building game. Some of the cards that show up in that card row are neutral, but all the other ones are either Rebel or Imperial cards. If I'm the Empire, I can acquire Empire cards from that card row. My opponent cannot acquire those cards, but my opponent can remove them from the card row and permanently remove them from the game, really, preventing me from getting some of the most powerful cards from that card row. And when they do that, they get a bonus. I love this mechanism of having this interactive card row. These characters, these ships, these entities are out there in the world, out there in the universe, doing their own little thing. And you are deciding, am I going to add this to my deck or not? It means that the interactions in Star Trek, or Star Wars, not Star Trek, whenever the interactions in Star Wars, the deck building game, are largely with that central row. There are some direct-to-player interactions, but when I've invested in a card and added it to my deck, my opponent can't do much about that. Once it's added to my deck, but they had the opportunity, because that card was in the card row, in many cases, to choose to try to remove that card from the card row. So these direct player interactions, even in a dual player game, or dueling two-player game, are happening with that card row instead of me directly antagonizing you. I really like that. I don't mind dueling games where I am hurting my opponent. That's what we're signing up for in a dueling game. But I really like the feel of that middle card row in Star Wars, the deck building game. That's my number 8 favorite game right now. At number 7 is one of the games that I reach for often when I want a heavier Euro game, and this is Tzolk'in. This is one of the older games on the list. I think it came out in 2012, but I still love getting this to the table, not just for the dials. You're placing workers on these dials and letting them stay on those dials until the dials turn and the workers essentially age and move you towards better and better benefits when you pull them off. Not only that central hook to the game, but also just the way it does advancements. You can improve your ability to take different actions. It has these tracks that you can move up on, has these tiles that you can go after. It's just like all the things that I love about a Euro game in one package, done really, really well. I love this game. Yeah, this game just scratches all the itches that I have when I want a heavier Euro game. It is a little bit much to teach, and so I love when players already know how to play Tzolk'in, but even if I have to teach it, I'm happy to teach it because you can kind of teach it one dial at a time. They've delineated the actions into these different tiles, which is really, really helpful. I love Tzolk'in, one of the heavier Euro games that I really, really enjoy. That's number 7 on my list. At number 6 on the list is Terra Mystica. Terra Mystica is a game that actually has several different offshoots now. It has Terra Nova, which is a lighter, shorter version of the game, has the newest version, Age of Innovation, which is a slightly heavier version of Terra Mystica, and also Gaia Project, which is the lowest on my personal list. It's definitely the heaviest, and for some people that will make it the favorite. For me, it makes it the lowest on the list. But I admire the design of all of these games. Terra Mystica is one of the first games I played, maybe even the first game that I played, where I have a player mat, and I load up that player mat with a ton of tokens at the beginning of the game, and during the game, I am placing those tokens on the board. I'm paying to place buildings. I am upgrading buildings, and when you do that, you have to take the lower value building, the building that you're upgrading, and put it back on your map. And the reason this is relevant is that when you collect income in Terra Mystica, you look at your map, you look at all the things that you have revealed by placing buildings on the board. I think one of the first instances of this was Hansa Teutonica or Eclipse. Those might have been the earlier games that had this mechanism of take things off your player mat to improve your income, but Terra Mystica does it so well. It does that while adding also asymmetry, because certain areas that you pull off on your board, certain things that you pull off, reveal unique asymmetric benefits. I also just like the look and the feel of the game. It's very pleasant. It's a light fantasy theme, but I really like that theme. And yeah. Terra Mystica has inspired a lot of different games for me. It's also a perfect information game. From the beginning of the play of every game, you know exactly the unique goals for that game, and most everything else kind of stays the same, and yet it is so replayable, largely due to the asymmetric factions. Terra Mystica is my number 6 favorite game. And number 5 is another push your luck game, the Quacks of Quedlinburg. I love this game. In fact, I love this game, I think, the most without any expansions. I played all the expansions with Quacks, but it almost becomes a lot. It becomes a lot when you have all those expansions. So I am happy, I think I am the happiest to play the core game of Quacks. Quacks is a push your luck bag building game where every round you are using some currency, if you'd like, to acquire up to 2 new tokens and put those tokens in your bag. And then simultaneously with all other players, you are pulling tokens out of the bag in this push your luck mechanism because you're hoping not to draw a certain value of white token. If your white tokens that you have drawn and placed in your cauldron add up to more than 7, then you bust. The wonderful thing about Quacks, as I mentioned many times on this channel, is that when you do bust, you don't totally bust. What it means is that at the end of that round, you have a choice. Instead of gaining both victory points and currency to spend on more tokens, you have to choose between those two things. If you bust, you get either the currency or the victory points. If you don't bust, though, if you stop, you get both of those things. So it feels really good when you don't bust. It also feels fine when you do bust. So I love that element of Quacks of Quedlinburg. It's very friendly. The simultaneous play is really nice, and it's really satisfying to build this engine of your bag, to build these different tokens that are unique to your bag, and to pull them out and hope to not draw those white tokens. Quacks of Quedlinburg, my number 5 favorite game right now. My number 4 favorite game, and my top trick-taking game on the list right now, is still Skull King. I have a number of other games that probably will make this list in the future, could make the list in the future, but when I want a trick-taking game and I just want to sit down and have fun with my friends, Skull King is still the one that I go to. This is a game that ramps up. So in the first round, every player only has one card in their hand, and you're going to bid either 0 or 1 to say, I think I can win this one trick, or I think I won't win this one trick. And then in round 2, you have 2 cards, then 3, all the way up to 10 in most player counts for this game. So I really like this sense of escalation. Even though there's no engine building or actual progression in the game, it still feels like you are ramping up from round to round. That feels really good. It also makes it easy to onboard new players who wouldn't know how to bid for a 10-card hand, but a one-card hand, you bid 1 or 0. If you mess up, that's fine. You're not going to lose that many points. Skull King also has a wonderful nil bid aspect to it, which means that if you bid 0, you gain 10 points for every card that was in your hand for that round. So in round 9, if you bid 0 and you successfully pull that off, you don't win any tricks at all, you get 90 points, which is huge. It means that in any game of Skull King, as you enter the 8th, 9th, and 10th round, you feel like you have a shot, especially if you do that nil bid, or if you have a great hand and you get it right. If you get your bid right, you're gaining 20 points per bid if you get that right in a hand. Skull King, it's a lot of fun. It's just a pure fun trick-taking game. I have a blast with it. That's why it is my number 4 favorite game right now. And number 3 is a game that's been on my list for quite some time now. It has delighted me from the very first play. That is Dune Imperium. This is another deck building game on this list. In Dune Imperium, you are building a deck of cards from the world of Dune. Different characters, different vehicles, even some sandworms if you want them. And in this game, you're trying to get 10 victory points. So that's very unique to many of these games on this list where you're trying to get hundreds of victory points. In this game, you're just trying to get 10. And so there's all this great tension to the game to push just far enough to get up to 10 victory points, to outrace your opponents to get to that 10th victory point faster than they do. And you're doing it by a couple different ways. One, you're trying to win combat. There's a combat every round that you can participate in if you want to. Or you are pushing up different tracks. There's these 4 different unique tracks on the board based on your influence, your allegiance to these different factions in the game. It's also a worker placement game. I love deck building. I love worker placement. The cards that you play in this game determine where you are allowed to place workers. And then the cards left over in your hand at the end of the round, another element that I really enjoy, determines, it gives you some combat bonuses, or they give you influence or skill. I forget the term. Clank it's skill. Here it's influence to acquire more cards and add them to your deck. There's this strong sense of progression in the game. You're progressing up tracks. You are sometimes gaining more workers permanently. You're improving your deck. You're gaining these intrigue cards that can surprise opponents. You get to feel a little sneaky too. It all adds up to like all the things that I love in a game like this. Dune Imperium, brilliant game, is my number 3 favorite game right now. Also one of the longer games on this list, but not quite as long as the longest one, arguably Ark Nova. I've played Ark Nova in 2 hours. It was a fairly rushed game, but we made it happen. 4 players, 2 hours. But most of the time, Ark Nova is going to take around 2.5 or 3 hours. This is, like, if I'm thinking about how to design cards well in a game, if I'm designing a tableau building game or an engine building game, or a game where I'm doing anything with cards, Ark Nova is the game that I think about. I think this game does some wonderful things with cards. You have these animal cards that you're trying to play in Ark Nova, and each one has cost. Many of them have thresholds that you have to reach or barriers that you have to cross before you're even allowed to play them. And then once you play them, they give you ongoing benefits that you can use to play other animals. They often give you instant benefits, they give you endgame benefits, and they give you other sorts of ongoing benefits written in text down here as well. They also give you points, and they give you income. They give you every card that you play feels so good, especially since many times it feels earned. You can't just instantly play it. You really have to work up to it and allocate certain amounts of your income and often play other cards that even allow you to play that card in the first place. So when you do play that card, when I play that Lesser Flamingo, the Dusky Leaf Monkey, or the Jaguar, I've earned it, and it feels really, really good. Oh, and you have to have an enclosure for that animal, too. So you need to have this, the animals are paired to this spatial element in your zoo, so you have to plan ahead for that, too. It also has a wonderful action selection mechanism where you are, you have these 5 different action cards in front of you. So the whole game is distilled down to these 5 cards that are right in front of you. They have the instructions on them. You are choosing one of those cards, and based on how far to the right it is, determines how powerful that card is. It's a wonderful action selection system. I love that in Ark Nova. Ark Nova, probably, again, that may be the heaviest game on my list. I said that might be Tzolk'in earlier. I think Ark Nova is probably a little bit heavier. I love this game. The only reason maybe that it isn't at the top of the list, well, it's a reason that I'll mention in a second, but part of it is that I haven't played it in a little while because I'm really excited about the expansion, and I've wanted to kind of build up my excitement for the expansion, which is coming out very soon. And once I play that, I might bump back up to number 1 on the list. So I'm really excited for that. But for the time being, Ark Nova is number 2 on my list. At number 1 right now, though, is another 2020-23 release that reminds me a lot of Ark Nova. It is Earth. And Earth, like Ark Nova, is a tableau building game. And like many of these games, it's also an engine building game where my tableau is improving and my engine is improving over the course of the game. I think the main reason Earth edged out Ark Nova for my list right now is because Earth offers simultaneous play. I'm realizing for many of these heavy Euro games, while I am fine with indirect tension between players, in fact, I love the indirect tension between players. Am I going to grab this worker placement spot before you do? Am I going to grab this card before you do? I like that. But I don't want much more interaction than that. I want to focus on building my island, building my zoo, and not have you really interfere with that all that much. I like that. That's what I want from these games. And that's why I really, really love Earth. Earth lets me just focus on this island, this beautiful island that I'm trying to build. And not only am I placing cards on the island, Earth levels up a little bit. I'm placing different types of tokens on those cards as well. I'm placing growth on those cards. I'm growing up in these beautiful columns. You can't really see it on the back of the box here, but there are some tokens that let you grow cards up. There are also, sprouts. What's the name of those little things? Sprouts. Sprouts are there. There's also these cubes that you can put on your cards to improve them and make them even better. But the main feature, the reason that I think I bumped this a little bit higher than Ark Nova, is that I can play Earth in about an hour, maybe a little bit longer, because it is simultaneous. You're doing things at the same time with all other players. And in addition to that, the simultaneous play, when you are doing the simultaneous play, you're choosing, the current player, the active player is choosing an action, and all other players get to take that action. But the nice little hook to this is not only are all other players taking that action, or a weaker version of that action. It still feels good to be the current player to have that choice. Not only are you doing that, but all players, including the player who chose the action, also get to activate all cards in their tableau that share a color with that action they chose. So for example, on my turn, if I chose this red action, if I chose the red action, I get to activate in order all of the red cards in my tableau. So by action, I not only get the benefit of an action, but I also get the benefits of all those cards if I'm able to string them together in a way that benefits me. That feels really, really good in Earth. And all players get to do that. So all players are kind of running their own little engines throughout the game. I really, really love this game. It has so many cards in it, so much replayability just out of the box. And yeah, I'm loving it. It's my number 1 favorite game right now, and it will definitely be on my list of top 10 favorite games of 2023 as well. I think I have 2 games on the list from that. Well, Ra is arguably, Ra is a new edition of an older game, so that will make a top 10 list for 2023. But Star Wars and Earth are going to be on that list as well this year. Maybe Age of Innovation for Terra Mystica. We'll see about that. These are my top 10 favorite games right now. I'd love to hear what your favorite games, maybe your top 3 favorite games are that I mentioned today, either on my top 10 list or in the honorable mentions. Let me know those. And also, maybe let me know your top 3 or top 5 favorite games right now, regardless of what I have said on my video today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks.